Mike DeCorte with AWS. Today I'm going to be going through the procedure of replacing the inner bearing on the rotary screen. It's not as big a procedure as most people think, and it's quite easy once you know the steps. First thing we're going to do is give it a little squirt of WD-40 on the bearings to make sure that they're going to be free on the shaft. Quite often a little moisture rust gets in there, and a little bit of penetrating oil goes a long way. You may have a brush assembly on the outside of the rotary screen here. First step is to take that off, and then what holds this cap on is a friction fit around the outside, and the inner bearing is held on by 2 set screws to the shaft. So you want to loosen off those 2 set screws, and once you have the set screw loose, you can leave your Allen wrench in there. Just give the screen a turn and that'll rotate that bearing, make sure that bearing is loose on the shaft. And then it's a matter of popping the screen off the outside, just like that. Next step is to remove the clean out. It is held on by two clevises and 1/2-inch lock nuts. Loosen them off, give them a little bit of a wiggle, and you should be able to work its way off that shaft, just like that. The inner bearing, same thing with the 2 set screws. Now, you use the Allen wrench and try the same trick. If that bearing's not going to rotate like that, chances are it's not just going to slide off. So then what you're going to want to do is get this screen out of the way. So we'll take the 3/4-inch nuts off. And that leaves your bearing. You want to make sure these bolts don't drop into the fan. On some areas you'll have a little shim between the 2 flanges. Don't forget it. Now this bearing is loose, but if it is stuck to the shaft where you can't remove it, the best method I find is to clamp a pair of vice grips on, work it back and forth, and a little bit of emery cloth to remove any of the paint off that shaft goes a long way. A little WD-40, that bearing should slide right off of there. Don't forget there's a spacer on here to keep the screen away from the fan housing. We'll pre-assemble this back into the rotary screen. While you have the screen off, ensure that you check the welds on these fins. Just make sure that there's no cracks or anything coming apart there. The bearing is assembled on the back side of the rotary screen. If your unit has the shims, you can go ahead and just snug these up. If it does not have the shim, just snug up the bolts, but don't over tighten them. The shim allows that bearing to flex in the flange so that it doesn't bind up. You slide it all the way to the back, tight against the spacer, and lock it in place with the set screws. We slide our clean out back in place, noting that the threaded portion is notched out to fit around the shaft and to ensure that we have it in the right spot. What I'm going to do is snug these up a little before doing any final adjustment. Now, what I'm going to want to do is hold the drum of the rotary screen square to the fan, the same gap top and bottom, and ensure that this clean out is square to the outer edge and within a 1/2 inch of the outer edge, so as that it's not going to be contacting on the rotary screen blades. To torque that up, I'm going to use a pry bar just to hold that square so that it's not moving around on me as I tighten it up. We want to ensure that when the drum is square that we have minimal distance to the screen here, at least no more than 1/4 inch. We pop our rotary screen cap back on, give it a spin, listen for any contacts or ticks, push the bearing in tight. We lock the 2 set screws in place, ensure that it is free to rotate and that there is no heavy spots, no contact with the clean out, and comes to a nice smooth stop, not an abrupt stop.